Hey everyone, welcome back. Turns out that instead of having to wait for Tuesday for Donald Trump to be arraigned in court, we got the text of the indictment today. So, as I promised, let's talk about it. Now, one caveat I want to make up front is that this is a 49-page document and we are not going to be going over everything in it. I do highly recommend that you read it on your own though, as there is a ton of valuable information in there and it is presented in a very easy to read way. However, what we are going to go over in this video is some of the things that I talked about yesterday that I was looking for, as well as a few other things within the indictment that stood out to me that I think you guys might find interesting. Let's start off with the things that I said I would be looking for in yesterday's video. When it comes to willful retention of documents, it's pretty much exactly what I said it would be. We got several examples of Donald Trump speaking to people without security clearances about information that he knew to be classified, including that transcript of him speaking to reporters about the proposed attack on Iran. And we knew that he knew he was supposed to return those documents, as he has several conversations with his lawyer about, well, do we have to give them back? And then eventually it goes on to show how he misled his lawyers into thinking that they had found all the documents and returned them. So, those two sections, pretty simple. We see the willful retention, we see the obstruction of justice. But the conspiracy part, that was the part I was most interested in, and it turns out that it's on the less serious side of the spectrum, given all the possibilities. It is simply a conspiracy to obstruct justice between Donald Trump and Walt Nauta, who was one of his aides that was left over from his time as president. Now, Donald Trump was essentially ordering Walt to move around all of these boxes to different places within Mar-A-Lago, and Walt did the moving, along with several other Mar-A-Lago employees who are not named in this indictment. So, that's kind of all there is to that section. It's pretty straightforward. It's just Donald Trump and Walt Nauta essentially pulling a Scooby-Doo where they run in and out of doors as Trump's lawyers and the FBI and other federal officials try and chase them to figure out where are those darn documents. Moving on, the next thing that stood out to me was the number of charges. We had 31 counts of willful retention of national security information and 7 counts of various forms of obstruction of justice. Each of the 31 counts of willful retention was tied to a specific document that contained classification markings or other forms of national security information. However, we know that there were a lot more documents seized when the FBI raided Mar-A-Lago, including 102 documents with classification markings. So, why only 31 counts? I think the answer here is actually the classified nature of these documents. It's highly unlikely that they're actually going to be able to get a jury pool that has the relevant security clearances, so if you can't show these documents to the jury as evidence, you don't really have a case. So I'm sure that Special Counsel Jack Smith had to go to the various agencies that had produced these documents and say, hey, which of these can we mostly declassify so that I can bring this case to court? And there were some where they were like, okay, we cannot let you show that. That has really sensitive information. We need to keep that secret so that it protects our ongoing operations. But overall, here are 31 documents that we can mostly declassify so that you can show them to the jury in a way that they will understand its significance towards national security. So, when it comes down to the charging, that is why we only see 31 counts of willful retention when we know that Donald Trump had many more documents than that. The next thing I'm going to talk about didn't necessarily stand out to me, but I did see a lot of people asking questions about it online, so I figured I'd talk about it. And that is the fact that a lot of names seem to have been left out of this indictment. They've been replaced with things like Country A, Staffer 1, and Lawyer 3. And the reason the Justice Department does this is to protect potential witnesses from intimidation or retaliation prior to trial. We'll find out who all of these people are when it comes their turn to testify in court. But when it comes to a few of them, we can use a little bit of deductive reasoning and figure out who they probably are. When it comes to Country A, we know that that also has a reference to a potential attack, and given public reporting, we know that that's Iran. Trump is discussing General Milley in that context. When it comes to Country B, a country with a poor military situation circa 2001, that's Afghanistan. Now, with the Trump staffers, there's a lot of staff at Mar-A-Lago, so kind of hard to pin them down. But Trump lawyers, it's a little bit easier. There's also been a lot of them. But when it comes to Lawyer 1, that is most likely Evan Cochran, as we know that he conducted the search and was one of Trump's main lawyers throughout this entire affair. And when it comes to Lawyer 3, I can be fairly confident that that is Christina Bobb, as we know that she ended up signing the affidavit that went to the FBI saying, yes, these are all the classified documents that we have, there are no more. Now, that affidavit was obviously a lie, but Turns out, given Walt Nauta and Trump's shenanigans, Christina Bobb and Evan Cochran didn't actually know that. So they might be in the clear, but they're still going to appear as witnesses. Lawyer number 2, who knows? Trump's had a lot of lawyers. It could be any of them. The last thing that jumped out to me in this indictment was the bit of rhetorical flair that the special counsel added into the speaking section of the indictment before the official charges were listed. I think my favorite thing that he did was juxtapose some of Donald Trump's allegedly criminal actions with quotes that Donald Trump had said either during his presidency or during his campaign, where he went on and on about how it was so important for us to handle classified documents properly and how anyone who violates our laws regarding the preservation of national security information should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, of course, most of the time he was talking about Hillary Clinton and her emails, but it is interesting how sometimes your words do come back to bite you. And I'm going to put up my favorite example on screen and read it to you because I just thought it was absolutely perfect. The first thing I thought of when I heard about it is, how does the press get this information that's classified? How do they do it? You know why? Because it's an illegal process and the press should be ashamed of themselves. But more importantly, the people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves. Really ashamed. That quote can be found on page 17 of the indictment, and the preceding 2 pages are sections that describe Donald Trump actively giving national security information to reporters or staffers from his PAC who obviously don't have the requisite security clearance to know that information. And I think that the really nice use of irony within the narrative section of the report helps convey the fact that Donald Trump obviously knew that what he was doing was wrong and illegal because he'd said it multiple times, but he went ahead and did it anyway because he thought that he could get away with it. And it turns out that may not be the case. So, those were my big takeaways from going through the indictment. Obviously, there is a lot more information contained within this document, and I do highly encourage you to go through and read it for yourself. There's a lot more interesting things in there, such as pictures of how and where within Mar-A-Lago some of these documents were stored, as well as a lot more conversations that help support the charges that Jack Smith has brought. If you guys have any questions about anything that you see within the indictment, feel free to leave me a comment, and I can cover them in a future video. Until then, we'll have to wait until Tuesday to see how Trump pleads in court. Until then, think about it.